All right. Well, I've got my friend Nick Mason on the line. He's the founder and CEO of Turtl. What's going on, my friend?
Yeah, what's going on? Well, it's a great day here in London, but it's great to be talking to you, Jonathan. Yeah, it's good to speak. We've been working together for a while, but this is the first time I think we've spoken like this.
Exactly. And I feel remiss because we were not too far away from you. I was out there in Spain, which is a hop skip, at least in my book, in terms of like DC. We went out to Switzerland and Spain for a bit to kind of spend some time doing traveling and catching up with friends and whatnot. So next time I'm out there, I'll have to see you, Simon, and Ron and the whole crew.
Absolutely. I like how that's a small hop in American terms. That's like a big trip for us. For you guys,
Really?
that's like down the end of the road. Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, it's only 2.5 hours, right? Flying?
That's nothing.
How far?
Nothing.
Yeah, it's nothing. It's easy. Easy. Let's see, man. Well, before we get into it, what I always like to do is, just give people a little bit of context. I'm sure there's some that haven't heard of Turtl, and for those that haven't, it's always good to kind of have some context on what you guys are up to and what it actually does before we kind of get into some of the things around PDFs, leaning towards the sides of being an outdated content format and some other things. But you want to give your kind of take? I mean, I understand it really well, but
Yeah.
because we've been working for a while, but you, I'm sure, could explain it better.
Sure. So let me give it a go. So what Turtl is we work with businesses large and small who need to publish in-depth information. So we're thinking about reports, white papers, case studies, product information, all that kind of stuff that really is needed in a more considered purchase. So we work with companies who have that need, and what we offer is a way to create, personalize, publish, and crucially track those digital documents. And we do that in a way that delivers up to 10 times increase in reader engagement versus PDF that I know we're going to go on and talk about, all without any need for design or coding skills. So we're really about that long form information, making it perform better and lowering the barrier to entry and to achieve those kinds of results.
Love it. You nailed it. And I think, to me, like those two biggest points are massive, right? Being able to track and understand people's behavior on the actual content, what they're engaging with, what they're spending more time on and whatnot, because then you can personalize what you're doing with that type of person a lot better than you could if you just said, hey, here's a PDF. I hope they read it, because what we see is a lot of times, many people aren't even opening up those PDFs. When you talk to them and qualitatively like ask them like, hey, like, how did you like the content? Oh, I haven't read it yet. Or I read like the first page and I stopped. And maybe the content wasn't good and maybe that's why they stopped. But many times you just don't get that feedback, at least that quickly. And so then you're running around trying to figure out like, why isn't this creating demand for our business? Why aren't people coming in and asking for demos? I mean, we shot this thing out. We tried to educate them on the problem, give them some value, et cetera. And so I think that feedback loop is so critical.
Yeah, it's a classic example of how marketers wish it worked versus how it actually works. So in an ideal world, you publish the PDF and suddenly you get demo requests coming in. It doesn't work like that. So a very common pattern that we see is someone will produce a piece of content. They'll very commonly put it behind a lead capture.
Yep.
When they get frustrated with the demos not just rolling in. And then they'll get, thousands of leads and they'll give those to sales and they say, look, that's our job done. And sales look at the list. How do you follow up? You don't know who's engaged and who's not. And so what we're able to do is to say, well, look, you should follow up with these people about these things because this is where the engagement was. Don't bother with this bunch of people because they didn't read beyond 5 seconds. And so you can really focus in. And what it allows you to do to your other point there is to also understand what's really resonating. And so, when I talk about topic A versus B versus C, where do I get the most engagement? Where do I get the most traction? Great. I can talk about that in next time and differentiate my message to different audiences. So the tracking is really crucial, as you say.
Yeah, it's crucial. And I mean, I think the other thing too is that many people have not focused on the actual intent level behind some of these quote unquote leads of people that download an ebook or a white paper or this or that. And so to your point, all of them were just getting flushed down to sales, and sales said, okay, cool, I'm going to follow up with all these leads. But none of them really wanted to talk to sales. They weren't ready. And so especially when you are following up with usually a fairly aggressive or blunt, straightforward kind of direct, hey, let's get a demo, let's get on a call, et cetera, and you're cold calling them, it makes you not want to engage with the pieces of content. And so it's not that you can't reach out. You just have to match the right type of follow-up with the right intent level. And so clearly if someone asks for a demo, well, guess what? You're going to give them a demo, learn more about their business, so on and so forth. And so I think that some of these trends around gated, we're not going to talk about all the gated, ungated stuff here on this one, but I think that's the big thing to keep in mind with these types of plays is what is the intent level and what would we expect to happen? And so to your point with Turtl, you could actually personalize that type of outreach even more because then hey, I know that only 20% of the people that actually view this are the ones that actually are really engaged. I mean, they went through the whole thing. They paused on this. They were doing other things and activities within the content. And so then you can have a much more specific type of follow-up, which, is a better experience to the buyer.
Absolutely. And the thing that's always funny to me is, we expect that when we're looking at other properties like our website, for example, or our spend on LinkedIn or our spend in other places, we expect to get those sort of metrics to understand what's
Right.
working. Whereas when it comes to, some of those really high value pieces, people spend a lot of money on producing case studies, thought leadership, white papers. The status quo is still, well, we got this many downloads or we captured this
Right.
many email addresses. And it's like in 2023, soon to be 2024, there's got to be a more sophisticated, better way to do this. The analogy that I give is it's like, getting a bunch of people into your shop, into your physical store, and then just sort of totally ignoring them and randomly saying the same thing to everyone, regardless of whether they're sort of in and out or browsing or
Good
looking over
point.
here or looking over there. It's like you wouldn't do that. You'd look at them, you'd look at their body language, you'd understand, and you'd tailor what you're doing to try and, give them what they need. So I think there's a huge opportunity for anyone producing long form content to do a better
Yeah.
job of really understanding intent, as you say, by studying engagement. And the first step to doing
Right.
that, of course, is to track the engagement in the first place.
Exactly. I love that. Well, let's get into one of the things that I know that we push for you guys. You guys have promoted it a while, and it's been, I think, one of the key points, if I'm not wrong, in terms of your strategic narrative, which is that the PDF is effectively dead or outdated or not effective, and Turtle Docs really is the future. And so I'd love to get your take on just like, why are people still using the PDF? Because you already said it anyway, right? I mean, lots of marketers, and we do it even for some clients we work with today, where it's loading up a PDF doc of some kind into a lead gen form, giving that asset out, emails collected, passed in the CRM, and then they do whatever they want with it after that. So I don't know. What's the kind of context here? I mean, why should people think about this differently?
Yeah, I think the reason why PDF is still used is just sort of status quo and habit, and everyone knows how to produce a PDF, and everyone knows what they're going to get, and yeah, it's sort of the default, if you like, and so what's happened is that marketers have gone from producing physical stuff 30 years ago, giving salespeople nice physical documents to hand out. Along comes the internet. Well, we can take that physical document and put it online in a PDF, and then along comes sort of the HubSpots and the Marketos, and we can do that behind a lead capture form. That's kind of cool. So it's sort of this natural evolution, and you can see why it happens. But I think that, the big sort of limiting factor, and obviously the PDF isn't dead because it's still being used. But as far as we're concerned, it certainly should be phased out. Let's say, if we're being a little bit less dramatic over the coming months and years, it should be phased out. And a large part of that, as we've said before, is because there's no engagement tracking. You can't see how people are engaging. I download it, I go totally off grid. So you can track me all the way through my great journey with your LinkedIn adverts and onto your website and into your lead capture form. The minute that you can actually start to see what I'm genuinely interested in when I start engaging with the content, the light goes off because there's no tracking available on that PDF. So that's one side of it that is a massive missed opportunity, and why I think it needs to be phased out. But the other is just purely based on engagement. I mean, what a PDF does is essentially replicate on your screen what can be achieved on paper. And, the medium through which we're talking now, i.e. the internet and modern computers, are, unbelievably more capable in terms of what they can offer than what a dead tree can offer. But yet we continue to put stuff in that format. And we run studies on this to, our own sort of thought leadership. And we've done some quite good sort of eye tracking studies where we've shown a 10x improvement when you're using interactive content, our format, versus PDF, exactly the same content, but people engaging for 10 times longer, purely because you're making the content more enjoyable, more engaging. So there's a host of different reasons to sort of move away and do something more dynamic and more interactive. The big ones from our perspective, obviously, as I say, are more engagement, which is what you want, because it's that intent and that engagement that you can score to understand, who you should be following up with. So generating more of that in the first place is a good thing. And then actually being able to track that intent and use it in your follow-up marketing and in your outreach. So I'm not sure if I've answered the question there, but the PDF, those are the major drawbacks that we see, and why we believe that, marketers looking to the future should be thinking about doing less rather than more.
No, I agree with you, because I mean, the things that we have to use as paid marketers when we don't have a tool like Turtl is we're looking at engagement rate, right? So comments, likes, we're looking at CTR, and then ultimately we're looking at downloads if it's a gated piece. And that's really it, right? And so then you can say, all right, we've got two pieces of content. One had a significantly higher engagement rate. and also had a conversion rate that was 2 times the other piece. Therefore, it sounds like this specific audience or segment of the ICP likes this piece of content more. And so then you could pass that data back to the content team and say, hey, great, we know that this content resonates. And so let's produce more of it. But I think to your point is like, there's a big hole of information there that we're not looking into. And so just because someone downloaded it doesn't mean they consumed it, doesn't mean they liked it, doesn't mean they got anything from it. And so a lot of times, some of this content's honestly just being generated to get the download, get the email, and then figure out a way to follow up, which is silly these days with the amount of third-party data that's out there. But go ahead.
Exactly. And what it encourages is sort of the proliferation of clickbait type content, where if you're just chasing the download as the metric, like, yeah, you're going to make the title as clickbaity and as appealing as possible.
Exactly.
The substance might not be there. So you could be, and we see this sometimes with customers where they've got a great sort of clickbaity headline and they get loads of people and they say, yeah, look, we're doing a great job. We got, 16,000, 20,000 reads of this thing. Bounce rate is high and the engagement is low. And so all you've done in a way is sort of do a bit of a bait and switch on people. And you thought you were doing a great job, but really, they didn't get the value. And so, yeah, you've got to look beyond the click. The other metaphor that we use for this is sort of, are you trying to optimize the envelope or are you trying to optimize the thing that's actually inside? Because it's the thing that's inside that gives value to the customer. And so you've got to, or to the prospect. So you've got to make sure that that is engaging. And if you can't measure that, you've got no way of knowing.
Right. Curious your thoughts on this. You said, the post-click motion, right, which I think is so important. This is also the before-click side. And so I'm sure you've heard this being talked about, and I know we've even done some of this for you all, but thinking more about the in-channel consumption of a message or piece of content. And this is nothing new in marketing world or advertising. This is purely just looking at someone that doesn't click on an ad, which is usually 98, 99% of people, right? The other people that are just lurkers, passively consuming information, just like when you post something out organically on LinkedIn, there's probably 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many impressions you get on a regular post, but thousands of people that are seeing and reading your post, but not liking, not commenting or anything, but potentially getting value from it. And so I'm curious of your thoughts on that, because we talk a lot about that with our clients on how to create more content like that. And so whether it's using, this gets into the advertising world, but like document ads or carousels or videos or other assets like that to allow someone to, stay in the channel itself, like LinkedIn or Facebook, before they actually go outside of the channel. I was curious if you had a take on that. Maybe this is going outside of Turtl, but what's your thought there?
Yeah, I mean, so this is the stuff I think, if I'm following you right, that people refer to sort of like the dark funnel and dark social, all this stuff, which is very hard to kind of measure. Yeah, I mean, by its nature, it's very hard to rationalize and very hard to understand engagement. And it's part of the sort of the challenge of, how do you know that you're building demand and building awareness? And it's a somewhat intangible question. I suppose where we help with that is that, what you're typically looking for on LinkedIn, let's take that as an example, is understanding, how many people viewed it, how many people perhaps followed a link, how many people liked it. The thing that you can do when you're using a platform like ours is to actually see, well, if you included a piece of content in there, what was the engagement rate up LinkedIn, for example? So just explain that. Right. What we're obviously able to do is to say, well, how much of your traffic came from LinkedIn, and therefore how much potentially correlates with that sort of invisible dark social type stuff. And are you generating engagement, and are you therefore spending on the right channel? So one of the things that we see sometimes with customers is, if they're splitting spend between Twitter and LinkedIn, let's say, and they're saying, well, look, LinkedIn is our preferred channel, making this up. It's not always this way around. So we're putting 80% of our budget there, let's say. We're able to sort of say, well, yes, you're generating organic kind of stuff, let's say, from LinkedIn, but then people aren't consuming it for very long. So they're reading for like 30 seconds. Whereas on Twitter, you're getting less volume, but people are reading for a lot longer. So does that mean that actually you're doing a better job over here? So it can start to provide clues around, where you're building that sort of less visible demand and let that less visible intent and engagement and what you might do to get more of it. So that's how we can help in that context.
Yeah, agreed. I think it's an important conversation. And I mean, to your point, it's not easy to track. And so you'll have to think of ways, either self-reported attribution, just asking people, how do they hear about you? That's one. Very imperfect and still one touch point, and it's requiring people's memory. And sometimes people just put internet, to be fair. But, there are some people that give a little more detail. And if you're marketing to marketers, usually marketers have a little bit of empathy towards other marketers, or sympathy rather, that, hey, we want to help you out and kind of, let you know how we heard about you and whatnot. But, I think there's other things you can do with impressions on LinkedIn. I'm sure you've heard about some of this. You can take impressions data from LinkedIn And then you could map that against leads and deals within HubSpot. And so, sure, no one likes to talk about influence. We'd all rather have sourced opportunities from marketing, but you can't completely ignore the fact that there's tons of people consuming messages in the channel. And so it's just, again, important that pre-click and post-click motion. Everyone thinks about just the click and how do we get the most of them into my bucket and to my landing page and to conversion. And so it's not that that's important. It's just, you got to balance it.
Yeah, I think for me, and I don't know if you agree with this, Jonathan, I think that, how we try to look at it and how we encourage customers to look at it is that, the content that you're producing first and foremost should offer value to the person, the recipient. Like,
yeah,
don't start with how am I going to get the most clicks and the most download and the most opens. Start with how am I going to offer the most value, and then you'll get the clicks, and that will follow naturally because there's value there. People are going to want it. And so whether it's pre-click, post-click, if you focus it on offering value through the content, I think that you can't go too far wrong.
I think you're totally right. Well, just curious, like on a practical note, like people that are using Turtle Docs and promoting it via paid, what are some things you're seeing them do around that? Or if not paid, you don't have an example top of mind, just anything else. I mean, when they've got a Turtle Doc, like, boom, we did it. We've got this awesome white paper. It's super valuable to our given segment. How are they promoting that? What are they doing specifically? If there was some practical kind of takeaway that you've seen be really successful in kind of engaging the audience and getting them into Turtle Docs?
Yeah, so we see like real success over all channels. It just depends on the use case, and different things work better in different cases. So we see a lot of very successful ABM campaigns based on email, actually, where we're able to sort of actually track the individual, because obviously if you're sending from a CRM, we can do that tracking. And what that allows you to do very easily is to then pick up and say, well, we've got a ton of engaged people over in customer A or in prospect B. And we can go and follow that up, and we can then go and tailor our messaging, because we offer the personalization piece as well. We can go and tailor the messaging to those interests and prioritize these accounts among our list of sort of hero accounts, let's say, that we're going after. So email can be really good for that. And on the other side of things, when people are using LinkedIn and channels where perhaps you don't know always who the person is, it comes back to that sort of passive identification and what have you that we can do once people are in the content. So it really varies channel to channel, but we're sort of channel agnostic in that way is the best way I can put it. And depending on the campaign and what you're looking to achieve, we also see people deploying us, behind, although I've just said that, it's not the preferred way, behind sort of lead capture forms. And that can be quite useful, because at least then you're passing to sales, as I said before, not just a list of 5,000 people who opted in or put in their details, but a sort of a ranked list with, this topic, that topic, this is what you should speak to that person about. So there's no sort of silver bullet, one size fits all. It's just a question as to what's the best fit for the campaign.
Totally. And I think, one of the things that to me makes a lot of sense if I were to think about a plan is you've got, a piece of content, whatever it may be, inside a Turtle Doc, right? So you could run purely just a website visit type of campaign on whatever paid social channels, and have to be linked in, to your point, could be any channel. And then you lead them to that actual content itself, right? Because you consume it directly on the website, similar as we've done for you. And so they can flip through that. So to your point, maybe you're not getting that person's email off the initial click from the channel, but I know that Turtle's also really great about leaving some open opportunities for them to convert inside the actual document itself. And so they don't necessarily need to convert right there and then on a lead gen form. They could then start at least consuming a little bit of the content and say, oh shit, like, wow, like this is awesome. And I'm actually really interested because they talked about XYZ thing, as long as it's not too product pitchy. And I'd like to actually get a demo of this. And so you'll see conversions actually inside Turtle Docs, which I think is great as well. That kind of bounces out the equation there.
That's a really good point. I mean, you have to think about, again, what you want as a marketer. Do you want sort of engagement, intent and demand first, and then sort of worry about how you're going to convert that later? Or do you want to start the other way around? And so again, sort of a challenge with PDF is once I've got the PDF, you can't stop me having it forever, and you can't really engage with me beyond there. What you can do, to your point, with using interactive documents is you can say, well, after someone's engaged to this level, ask them for their details, or after someone has read 20 pieces of content for at least half an hour in total, then ask for their details. And you can also feed all of that back into your CRM. So one of the things that we do, and a lot of our customers do, is, based on, well, this person's engaged for 2 minutes here and 5 minutes there and watched a video here, feed that back into some kind of lead scoring or engagement scoring model within the CRM, which then sort of flags outreach from an SDR to pick up the phone and say, hey, it looks like you're really interested in this sort of topic. Here's some other content you might like. And by the way, we offer solutions. bunch of different things that you can do
Mhm.
when you start to actually look at engagement, rather than going back to the start of the conversation, rather than just how many leads, how many signups can we generate from this piece.
I love that. I love that. It's a good conversation, something we all need to be reminded of. And, we get pressure. I mean, you're a CEO, right? And so you put pressure on your marketing team and everyone else, right, to deliver results. And clearly, the more clear it can be for you, where you can say, hey, when I take $20,000 and put it over here, I get Y. Like we all want that. But sometimes, especially when you're talking about the pre-click and some other things that are maybe more create demand programs, we have to keep an open mind that, okay, we know that ultimately these activities do need to ultimately drive pipeline, SADs, opportunities, et cetera. But the reality is like not all of it's going to be perfectly black and white. And so we'll have to use other means to track this the best we can. And then also know that like, look at correlations, right? When we started doing X activities, like have we seen overall incrementally better quality, more people coming in, converting at a higher rate? And so those are the things that really kind of help you build that picture of like, hey, what's the actual impact? But none of this is easy. I mean, we talk about this with all the time with SaaS companies, and
Yeah.
everyone wants like the crystal ball of like, what's the one thing we do to drive blah, blah, 3x, 4x? Like, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of little things that have to come together for that to work.
Absolutely, and,
So,
and the challenge with it is it plays out over such a long time frame, because ultimately what you're trying to do is optimize cost of acquisition to lifetime value, and
exactly.
lifetime value is inherently an incredibly lagging metric. And so
Right.
what you have to do is work out what are the leading metrics, and even to get to the point of generating more SADs or whatever, that's still there's multiple phases that you have to go through, and I think that the best way that we think about this is you have to trust the process, which is
Yeah.
that you look at the data, you look at the intent, you look at the engagement. If that's going up, that's great. Whether or not you're generating more MQLs or leads or SADs or whatever, that will come. The ultimate sort of, well, it's not the ultimate leading indicator, but a very important leading indicator is how much engagement are you getting through your content, because that indicates that you're
Mhm.
reaching more people, they're engaging more
Right.
deeply. And so that's sort of a reasonable place to start. But you're absolutely right. It's the trade-off between sort of quality and quantity, and how do those things work out over time. If it was as simple and there was a simple bullet, silver bullet, it would be a much simpler thing and there'd be much less discussion around it. But it's also what makes it so interesting.
Yeah. No,
So
exactly. Exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. It's a tough one. I mean, we're never gonna solve it, no matter how much software tech you throw at it. And things are getting more privacy's. You guys are in Europe, right? So GDPR has been a thing
yeah,
for a while, but it's getting more and more intense in the US as well, with people locking down things and not giving out data as much. And so, that's just the world that we're going to live in. And so, but I want to move on to one thing in terms of like where you see content going a little bit, right? Because there's so many content formats, right? And we're talking about one, which was PDF.
mhm,
We're talking about another, which is Turtle Docs, which are interactive, allow you to, interact with the actual content itself, or just a static document that you have no information about. And there's videos, there's micro clips, there's posts, there's text-based posts, there's image-based posts, so on and so forth. There's all this different content. And I'd be curious, like you kind of staged it up, I think, well earlier on, where you were saying like, hey, eventually it started with like, you had newspapers or pamphlets or brochures actually printed out for the sales team. Then we made them digital. Now there's Turtle Docs. So I'm curious, like where you see the evolution of content going and the way people consume, because there are still so many ways
yeah.
to deliver content and to consume it. And it can be overwhelming sometimes for marketers. But any predictions, thoughts about where things are headed, or?
Yeah, I think sort of first of all, as a general point, I'd say again that the format is sort of secondary, and that may be a strange thing for me to say, but the first thing is what's going to offer value, and then work out how you're going to format that. Like that comes down the line. I think that we've seen a proliferation of formats, which I think is a great thing, because attention is an increasingly scarce commodity. So if you can reach me while I'm walking 10 minutes to the tube station on my way home, that's going to be through a podcast. It's unlikely to be through a longer form piece of content. But then if I'm sitting at my desk, I want to be able to read something and properly engage myself. So I think, it comes down to that context that people are operating in. We're sort of busier and more time poor than ever. But also the stage of the journey, and the seniority of the role, and the type of sale you're trying to make. So again, sorry to cop out again, but there's no one size fits all silver bullet, which is part of the beauty of the thing. The thing that we see, though, sort of from our perspective, is that long form content, quite interesting data point that we see, is that actually the complexity of the content really matters. So typically long form is used in more considered purchases and longer sales cycles and what have you. And what we see is that actually engagement goes up when the content is sort of slightly more complex and slightly more involved. And what I think that speaks to is when people are consuming a longer form piece, they're looking to really engross themselves and educate themselves, and it's not sort of that sort of general awareness piece. So it's horses for courses, as we say. You know, there's many different types of content for different sort of uses and different stages and different sales processes. And it's about, as I say, first of all, you know, how we're going to offer value through content, and then, you know, picking the format from there. And each has its place in the journey, I would say.
Well, I love that you copped out. I think it's good to cop out on this type of question. And the reason is because there isn't a silver bullet for this. And I think you said it. And so I was setting you up a little bit because I knew you were probably going to say something like that. And everyone's always looking for the silver bullet. And, you know, there just isn't. And I think, you know, with content formats, to your point, there's a billion out there and you can create content in all sorts of formats. But, you know, if the content's not valuable, or it's not interesting, or it doesn't help someone solve a problem or align with something they're trying to learn, then it doesn't matter what format you put it in. It won't work. It will never work, you know? And so it always comes back to, you know, making sure that you understand your audience and all the typical things we all love to say on LinkedIn over and over again. It's like, yeah, of course we did know our audience, and create content they like. And then, you know, ideally my take on it is, you know, start with one, maybe two formats that you can really stick with and do really well before trying to create all this content in a zillion formats. And I'm all for the repurposing type of mantra out there, but we've got to be careful about taking on too much work to put everything in all these different formats and say, hey, we do these one or two things really well. And as we have more marketing resources or budget or whatever it may be on our team, obviously we can expand those things out.
Yeah. And I think as you're talking, I totally agree. The thing that I'd say is, while there's not a silver bullet, there is whatever the opposite of a silver bullet is. I don't know. Someone should coin that phrase, like a wooden bullet.
Maybe you. Maybe you.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to think about what that might be. But the opposite of a silver bullet is a format which isn't going to help you understand what's working. You know, because if you don't know, if you put something out there and it's hard to say whether it worked or didn't work, because as we said before, it's just opens, you're never going to be able to move forwards. So provided that the format that you pick allows you to understand, did it work beyond some superficial vanity metric? And then also within there, in the case of long form content, what within there really caused people to engage? Then you've got some data, you've got something to work with, and you can move forward. But I agree that you should start with a small list of things, but those things should be chosen in a way that you are inevitably going to learn. And this comes back to trusting the process, that you're inevitably going to learn and iterate towards what is really working. And if you're blind to that, then you're never going to get there.
Totally agree. Totally agree. The other thing I'd be curious of your thoughts on too, and something we talk about a lot, which is, you know, if you're a new brand and someone doesn't know you well, which is the majority of SaaS brands, I mean, unless you're Salesforce or HubSpot or something and everyone knows who they are, right? You know, many times you're still trying to solve a brand awareness issue of some kind, or there's people that are in your TAM or your ICP that still don't really know exactly what you do, right? And so sometimes when you offer them up this really more complex piece of content, like you said, more in that consideration stage when they really want to read, really want to go deep and take the time. This is, I guess I'll take a step back. This is more anecdotal and just thinking logically like a human in the way that I consume and talking with many other, you know, marketers and people in general, that you don't necessarily want to come in and just read this huge long form piece of content from a brand that you have no knowledge about, never heard of, because they have no reputation in your mind. You don't know who they are or what they do or anything. And so there's no context. And so a lot of times what we'll do, or at least advise other SaaS companies on, is say, hey, take that beautiful report that you just did that has, say, 1,000 different data points pulled from all your customers, and let's break up a few of those insights into whether it be a carousel. And this doesn't have to be just paid. This could be organic or whatever channel you want to distribute it on, but give people a little bit of a taste. It's the same thing how trials work, or how when you go to Costco, I don't know if you guys don't have Costco, I think in the UK. Do you?
Yeah,
You have Costco?
yeah,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, on Sundays, they always do their like food samples and stuff. So it's the same type of idea where you can start getting people used to the content. And so like an example for us, at Omni might be, I post a text-based post with a framework or something on LinkedIn. It's small, it's short, it's easy to consume. But then I take that same post and I make a newsletter, and it's twice as long, and it goes a lot deeper into some other complex things, maybe add some additional value to whoever wants to read it. And so I'd be curious how you think about that, because there's all different schools of thought on how to kind of bring people in. But I think this is really important, especially at your stage. And I mean, people in this kind of like Series A to Series C kind of range
Mm.
where there's still, growing brand awareness that's needed. And sometimes we can't just give them the whole big, thing all at once. We need to break that up a little bit. Any thoughts there, or disagree, agree?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And it's why, giving away small incremental amounts of value, to my mind, is sort of the way to go, whether that's content or product or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, if you think about, in the context of giving away content, the question, the ask from the person on the other end is their time, which is really valuable. And so the question is, well, how prepared am I to do that? What level of commitment am I prepared to make? And like you say, if a Gartner does a report, it's like, well, maybe I've got 15 minutes to go and read that. But for someone I've never heard of, it's like, well, maybe I've got 30 seconds. So give away 30 seconds worth of stuff, but make it so that once you've shown to me, actually, that 30 seconds was really valuable, I can then go and spend a minute, and then 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes,
Right.
and then you've hooked me in. So I think it's just about this incremental sort of ramp, rather than asking people to have a massive barrier that they've got to jump over and commit 15 minutes to understand what you're about. Start with the
Right.
simple thing and make it really easy to up that investment of time, if not of money at that stage, but investment of time as they get to actually trust and know the brand. So I think you're bang on. That's the way to do it. And if you've got stuff that only you know and is valuable, like, yeah, give away small amounts of that, and then lead people along like breadcrumbs.
Right, exactly. I mean, a great idea for you all, I mean, to lead someone into kind of a longer form, this is more of a product marketing play, is you can take the PDF converter, right? Where you take a PDF, you upload it, and then you can convert it into a
Yes.
Turtle doc. But you create a short little video on that process, just a little bit of a narrative, and be like, hey, so you're probably doing something like this on LinkedIn or Facebook right now, sending out these types of PDFs to your people, blah, 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 blah. Let me show you real quick how we can convert this and make it 10 times more interactive, delivering blah, 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 these value points. And then you just kind of show them real quick. And I'd have to think through this, of how doable all that is, but I know it's not a long process. It's pretty quick. And so something like that could be really valuable, where you've got that in the short form, but then you send them to a longer page where they can get some more information about what this actually is, how it really works, and all sorts of other things. And so that's an example of exactly how, like this, what we're just talking about right now.
Yeah, and even better than that, and I don't know whether our team have spoken to you about this yet, but just giving that to customers or prospects or people in the market in a totally free, just upload your PDF and see how that comes out at the other end. I mean, that's the ideal, right? The ask
Yes.
there in terms of the commitment, the investment from the other side is just find an old piece of content, stick it in, and this is the value that you could get. So it goes back
100%.
exactly to what we're saying. Don't ask people to sign up. Don't ask people to speak to sales. Don't ask. I'm sure that our team have spoken about some of these
Oh, yes.
principles. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. I think
100%.
Simon mentioned, yeah. So he's super keen on that. And I agree. It's just like, how can you create the maximum possible value without giving away, everything for the
Right.
minimum possible investment? So yeah, whether it's product that you're giving away or content or insights or whatever,
Exactly.
reduce the investment and go from there.
Exactly. All right. Well, I wanted to get a final take on one thing before we kind of sign off here, but it's hard to not talk about content and not have AI or ChatGPT or Jasper or something like that sneak into the conversation here, I feel like. But everyone's got a different take. I know there's a lot of people that are content marketers that are super anti any of this, because I think it's seen a little bit as a threat. And also, there's many points around AI content really just still not being good enough. It's kind of regurgitation of the same old topics. And so it lacks POV, or an actual unique perspective that aligns with the narrative of the company. And so, which I do agree with some of those things. I do think it's going to get better. And so you'll be able to insert your POV even into some of these things, at least to get down the road. Maybe not do it A to Z, but maybe 60% of the way or 70% of the way. But where do you stand on this? I'd love to get your thoughts. If you feel like, are you pro all this AI stuff, or do you think it's kind of way overhyped? Because it seems like there's this huge divide in the content world right now.
Yeah, I mean, so my view on it is that it's probably inevitable in the long run. I don't. Let's put it this way: like let's take a silly time frame. In 50 years, I think it will be solved. Those sorts of problems that you mentioned. So it's a timing thing. I think that what we see and where we're focusing effort. Well, no, to take a step back, I think generative AI is really interesting in the sense that it allows you to get an output much quicker.
Mm.
But the question is that output any good? is really the question. And so what we're doing from our side is if we break it into what's the medium and what's the message, right? You're familiar with the Marshall McLuhan sort of medium and message,
Yep.
how are you saying it versus what you're saying? We're particularly focused at the moment on how you're saying it. And so what we have
Right.
is billions and billions of data points around how readers engage with different forms of content. And so what we're doing is we're using artificial intelligence, not to try and change the message, but to try and optimize the format and the delivery. So what's the correct ratio of images to words? What's the correct length for the piece? What's the correct complexity of language? What's the correct
Love
use
that.
of video? So trying to solve that problem. And I think that what AI sort of generative AI in its first, not first incarnation, but its current incarnation lacks sometimes, particularly in the case of marketing, is like, yes, you've produced something, but was it better or worse than what I could have produced through other means? And until that data set is there around training it, not just to produce something but to produce something with a specific outcome or a specific better outcome, ideally, I think that there's always going to be the question around, well, should I, shouldn't I? Anecdotally, the conversation that I've had with marketers is that, people aren't ready, as you say, for it to write their marketing copy. And I think that that's correct for all the reasons that you give. But as I say, I think it's a matter of time. But I think what we can do in the short term is optimize the other side of things, which is the delivery and those other aspects, which are perhaps less owned by the brand, if you see what I mean. Because at the end of the day, if you don't own your fundamental position and your tone of voice and all those things, then kind of what are you?
Exactly.
But the actual execution of that in terms of the medium, I think that is a little bit less central. And so that's where we're focusing.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I think, it's one of these things like anything, and people have been saying this since, AI is not a new thing, right? We talk about it for more than a decade. But I think in the generative AI space, clearly that's been new over the last year or so. And so everyone's like super crazy about this, even though Jasper was doing this well before ChatGPT. But it's nice that ChatGPT got the kind of masses more interested in it and made a huge splash. But these things are great. I mean, we actually use it sometimes internally to get some text ads for Google ads written, at least as a starting point. Sometimes it's crap that comes out and it doesn't align with the way that the company wants to position. And so we need to make some edits to that. But when you're trying to kind of think about a whole bunch of different, ad sets or ad groups and RSAs, et cetera, within a Google Ads account, sometimes, just to get the ball rolling, get some ideas out the table is helpful. And so I think these tools, like anything right now, the way they'll be used, at least for the next year, I don't know. Let's see. You said 50 years. I'm not sure. We'll see how long it takes this thing to advance. But either way, whatever timeline it is, the point is that, using some of these tools now is important from my perspective. And you can at least get maybe 50% of the way there, saving you time and putting your time focus more on what's actually working, not working, analyzing data and trying to make a better strategy and plan moving forward versus just trying to actually write the actual copy itself. And so to me, those things are really, really important. But, again, it really depends on the type of content you're writing. I think long form probably has the hardest job. I think that's not as good there. I think little short headlines, little snippets and little things like that, where you can give it a meat of text, I think that works a lot better. But if you wanted to write a whole blog on something, it becomes much more difficult. And
Yeah,
yeah,
well, the difficulty with it, I suppose, is going back to the conversation around value, right? And
yeah,
what AI and things like ChatGPT know how to do today is to take what's already out there and write it in a different way or do whatever. But
exactly.
the point is if it's already out there, then how unique and how differentiated and how valuable is it? So if you're not bringing something new to the table, and AI sort of, I guess it can rewrite stuff, but you have to give it that something new. You can't expect it just to do the whole job for you. And that's why I think we are where we are with the thing. I suppose the question is how would that change? I haven't really thought about that, to be honest. How would AI ever overcome that? Presumably in the same way that human beings do. So until AI can sort of run research surveys and stuff automatically, which, maybe it will one day and get the results and synthesize them into a report, I think it's always going to need that external stimulus from a human being
Right.
to drive the uniqueness and the differentiated value of the content. Otherwise it's just, I've heard people talk about AI and generative AI is sort of average internet. Otherwise that's all you're going to end up with, right?
Right. I agree. Completely said it well. Said it really well. Well, anything that we missed that you think is really important to talk about within the scope of PDFs, Turtle Docs, kind of the wave of the future? Anything you think we missed or you think we nailed it? Got through it all?
Many things, but we'd be here all day. I think,
Okay, cool.
as you said, it's an incredibly complex landscape and, you can't do it justice in half an hour, but I think we've covered the main points for sure.
I love it. I love it, man. Well, it's great meeting you finally. I've heard lots of good things and love working with the team and everything. So of course, it's been a great partnership thus far. But if people want to reach out to you, I assume best place is either, of course, Turtl itself or your LinkedIn, Nick Mason, right? Any other spots they can find you if they wanted to reach out, just chat?
Those are probably the best places. Yeah, LinkedIn's always good.
All right. Well, thanks for listening to another episode of the Demand Podcast. Again, I'm Jonathan Bland, the co-founder of Omni Lab. I'll also have with me Jason Steele, who's the other co-founder of Omni Lab on this podcast as well. We're a demand gen agency for seed to Series B SaaS startups. If you like this episode, or you're looking for some help with demand gen, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn over a DM, or you can go just directly to our website. That's omnilabconsulting.com. Otherwise, we look forward to seeing you on the next episode where we'll be talking about all things demand gen. Until then, thanks. Bye-bye.